Hey everybody, it's Jay here again with another recent review. This time we're taking a look at the first issue of the brand new Image Comics and Skybound Publishing Transformers series, brought to us by writer and illustrator Daniel Warren Johnson and colored by Mike Spicer. So if you somehow haven't heard, this was a big deal a couple of months ago, where Robert Kirkman published a new series called Void Rivals, which it was kind of an open secret, but the big twist behind Void Rivals is that it was the start of a new unified universe, the Energon universe as he calls it, a shared universe between Transformers, G.I. Joe, and his new original series Void Rivals, as well as potentially other things coming forward. So that was a big deal. That was the big twist there. Everybody it got leaked a while back. Like, everybody knew it about, like, a year before it came out, but it was still a surprise to see reading that first issue and then having Jetfire show up. So it was still a big moment, but it was also, like, everybody kind of already knew. So here we are with the first of the Transformers series, the main Transformers series itself. I believe there are side series planned, but I don't remember exactly. I haven't seen anything specifically beyond just this main Transformers book. So I'm going to be trying to keep an active eye on not just this Transformers series, but the whole Energon universe in total. I've been reading Void Rivals, and it's quick review, it's pretty good. It's a little derivative premise-wise, but even without the Transformers connection, I think I would enjoy it. The Transformers stuff in that book is also pretty minimal. It's mostly relegated to just one-off cameos throughout the specific issues, but either way it is connected, but the story itself is kind of its own thing at the current moment. So the setting is another take on the whole G1 setting of the G.I. Joe Transformers series. So you get your classic designs, you get your classic setting and all of that. So it's not exactly a fresh, new, exciting take immediately right out of the box, but I'm not going to knock it for being unoriginal. I mean, IDW was also a G1 retake, and for, like, the first year or two, IDW was really good, and then All Hail Megatron happened, but we don't talk about that. So who knows? We got plenty of time. Again, this is the first issue. We have absolutely no idea what's coming after this. We don't know where it's going. We don't even know if Johnson's staying on the book or we're going to get different writers. So there's a whole big, wide field of possibilities going forward. And I can pretty confidently say that Image and Hasbro and Skybound and everybody involved here is going to try their absolute hardest not to repeat the mistakes IDW did, because there's a reason IDW is dying a slow and painful death, and all you have to do is look at the Transformers comic to figure it out. But enough about beating that dead horse. Let's beat the other dead horse of the G1 Transformers series. So a quick recap of the first issue. It's very much, again, a retelling of the first episode of the original series, with our plucky human protagonists discovering the Autobots and the Decepticons asleep on the Ark, just in time for them to reactivate and drag the Great War to Earth. So again, it's a pretty standard retelling. It starts, I would say it's about the first half or so of the very first episode, so them finding the Ark and them waking up and then them escaping the Ark, or the Decepticons at the very least. There are changes to the narrative. It's a little less condensed, so it's not like immediately jumping into that. I think, interestingly, it starts right there on Earth, with them already on Earth, the Autobots and the Decepticons. There's no backstory, there's no setup of the Great War, we don't see them leaving Cybertron, we don't get any of the standard backstory, origin story stuff of, setting up the Transformers, setting up Cybertron, the Great War, and all that, and them coming to Earth and crashing. It starts with them already there on Earth and waking up. And I think that's fair. I think pretty much everybody who cares about Transformers that isn't like 5 years old already knows this story by heart, and you don't really need to do another retelling of that backstory, especially not right out of the gate. You can save that. It's not like they completely go in blind. There's a little bit of setup, there's a little bit of world building there with the way the war is going, the Autobots and the Decepticons. It's very minimal. It's very much just to set the tone for the characters themselves and not just a lore dump for the audience. It's not also a straight retelling. There's a couple of changes between the original show and the Marvel comics and that continuity. There's a little bit of change-ups. I think the most major one is the time frame, is where I believe it's Jetfire initially says it's been a couple of centuries since he and the Autobots I guess technically he's not an Autobot here. It's a little weird. But it's been a few centuries since the Ark left Cybertron and he left Cybertron. So the Great War has only been going on for maybe a couple hundred years at this point, rather than the several million years that it's usually going on in the original cartoons or IDW and all that. So I think that's an interesting change. Optimus here is also relatively new to the role. I don't know exactly how new. I mean, obviously, again, you get a couple of centuries, so I don't know. We don't have a defined time scale yet, but it's been said several centuries. So it's probably not the usual millions and millions of years, but it's longer than we would expect. So again, we don't have an exact time frame yet, but there's a couple of changes here with that. The war seems to have just recently started with the Decepticons, so like Jetfire shows up and he's been asleep for a while. The Void Rivals guys woke him up. That was in the first issue. I mentioned that briefly. So he shows up and he doesn't even know what the fuck the Decepticons are. He doesn't know what the Autobots are. He doesn't know anything about the war. So at the moment, there's a lot of room for ambiguity and a lot of room to really kind of explore and take new opportunities, but so far it seems like your pretty standard setup of war between the Autobots and Decepticons over whatever the fuck, and that spilled over to Earth. There's a couple of hallmarks taken from early IDW as well, with Megatron is MIA and Starscream is de facto leader of the Decepticons, or at least our tiny little batch of Decepticons. The cast is so far relatively minor. Within this first issue, there isn't a whole lot of room for characters' exploration or anything. It's a very action-packed issue, so the cast so far is pretty minimal. Character-wise, there hasn't really been a whole lot established beyond Optimus and Starscream, and the most we've gotten characters established is our human cast. We've got, of course, as always, we got our old pal Spike and his dad and his sort of maybe girlfriend Carly. So we got your standard human cast that you usually get in the G1. We're no OCs at the moment, though their characters are pretty different. It's the setup we have with the human cast is very, I almost want to say like teen melodrama-y, which doesn't really sound fair, but it's the best way to kind of come up with it on the spot. Where they're really playing with the kind of blue-collar narrative that the original show set up, where like they're kind of in a small town, Spike's dad is an alcoholic, and he's kind of stuck in a kind of dead-end physical labor job, and his girlfriend's poor, and she kind of wants to leave the small town life, and she's working with her dad and all that. It's a lot of what you've seen before, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's derivative, but it's not, inherently derivative to the point of just insufferability. Again, it's the first issue. There's not a whole lot really left to explore, but it sets up a new angle for the characters that I think so far seems like it's going to be an interesting route, but seems like it's going to delve into melodrama, and it's probably going to... There's potential for it to crash, is what I'm going to say. But no, I do like the setup. I do like the way they've kind of established the setting. It's very fast-paced, but not to a detrimental degree, this first issue, even though the kind of narrative is very decompressed. I think so far, again, the most character establishment has been Optimus and Starscream, and I mean, it's Optimus Prime and Starscream. You know what you're getting on the tin. Those two tend to be very consistent across various incarnations, so there's not a whole lot really to be said about their depictions. They're very good depictions so far, but that's the most I can really say in terms of angle. But yeah, it's a very good first issue. There's a lot of action. It starts with the Autobots and Decepticons waking up on the Ark. But it's instead of like the usual let's just kind of just fucking meander around and then leave. No, it opens up with a full-on firefight there with Decepticons just gunning down the comatose Autobots. It gets really brutal. It's a very violent first issue too, where it really does set the tone well. Where again, it immediately starts off into straight up warfare. There's a lot of like death immediately. Like Bumblebee gets shot in the fucking face. Like first thing, like 5 pages in, he's probably not dead, but he's basically dead. Jetfire dies too. A couple of like nameless Decepticons die. I think like the fucking camera dudes, it was a refractor, whatever the fuck, and I think, and as well, Thundercracker gets blown to bits too, and it's surprisingly brutal despite it being mostly obscured by the explosion. Speaking of explosions, they also blow up the Ark too, so instead of the Autobots having their usual high-tech super secret base, they're kind of bumming around in the cliffside now. I think that's interesting as well, as Usually they have that sort of safety net of their ship, but now they've got nothing. So I think that's going to be set up an interesting angle later too. I think Ravage also gets blown up too. Yeah, a lot of people fucking die. A lot of the Transformers die, and it seems like they're going to go with a death is permanent kind of rule in this one because they seem to imply that Jetfire is dead. We also get some human violence too. It's pretty surprising. The issue ends with Starscream finding the power plant that Spike's dad would work at, and he fucking picks up a dude and crushes him in his hand, and we see him explode into a big blood geyser. It's really... It's very it sets the tone very well. I think it definitely establishes what we're going for here. It's G1 but with a twist, but it's not quite the same way that like IDW did it. So it seems like it's very solid setup. It seems like Johnson really knows what he wants to be doing with this, and I really liked it. I've really digged this first issue. The art is I'm a little picky on it. A lot of people have been critical about the art, mostly with the action scenes. I like Johnson's style. I really dig his artwork. He's got that very uses a lot of very heavy black, very heavy line work, thick shadowing. He does the detailing of the designs well. It's your standard kind of like, I think they call them the evergreen G1, where they're G1, but they're not really like based on anything specific kind of designs. But he does them really well. I really like the way he draws the characters. He has a very consistent look for the characters, but I think the issue is his style doesn't quite work for like the Autobots and the Decepticons in motion. Because like the human characters, it has his usual style, and they all look really good. They've all got a nice, distinct designs. A lot of really good environments too. Like in the first the first few pages, we get this veterans bar that his dad's at, that Spike's dad's at. It's very, really well drawn. The wood detailing is really nice, really intricate. Then you have his not girlfriend Carly's van, who's got this fucking ridiculous 80s power fantasy metal. That sort of generic 80s landscape painting on the side of a van where you get a fucking wizard and a Conan dude and a dragon and all that. Heavy metal album cover art looking kind of van. And that looks really good. That fits his style. Really nice color palette as well. Very strong color palettes. A lot of very mixed tones. I think the bright, colorful looks of the Transformers kind of stick out well with the sort of moodier background. And it's a lot of very distinct shapes there. But I think the problem is that Johnson's style doesn't quite work with the Transformers' looks. I think in motion they're a little funky looking sometimes. I think that's one of the main complaints, is that a lot of people don't really like the action because his style doesn't really work for the very rigid, boxy looks of the G1 Transformers. Which I don't necessarily think is a problem. I think his use of designs and the way he draws them looks nice. It's just the action so far feels very weird, very stiff. I think he is having a little trouble drawing them, but I don't necessarily think it's bad. I would not say the art is bad at all, but I don't think his style quite works for the G1 Transformers looks. So, I don't know, we'll see where it's going to go from here, the next issue, because the first issue is really good. I think the action flows very well from panels. There's a lot of very dynamic poses, very good choreography for the fights. But it is a little stiff, and it does look a little weird sometimes with the sort of boxy looks and the way his style meshes with the Transformers style. So, I mean, I hope he stays on the art for a majority of the series. I'm sure they'll probably change the artist at a couple of points, but I really digged it. I will say there are problems with it, but I wouldn't say it's bad. I would not say the art here is bad at all. It's very good art, very good style. It really works for the book. But I'm not going to say that there aren't complaints. And I do agree with people that there are issues with the art. So overall, very strong first issue, very strong opening to this new universe. I would highly recommend, if you're looking for something to wash out the taste of IDW out of your mouth, this is probably a good start. I don't know where it's going to go from here, obviously. I don't know what else they've got planned. I'm sure the first couple of issues are again going to be your standard retelling of the introduction of the G1 cartoon. And starting in a couple of months, we've got the G.I. Joe book starting with Williamson doing... It looks like they're doing kind of like a 2 series for G.I. Joe. One about the Joes and one about Cobra. So you got a a book about Duke, and then you get a book about Cobra Commander. So it looks like they're going to be doing kind of like a split narrative thing, kind of like what later IDW did with Transformers, but rather than being shitty fucking Doctor Who fanfic bullshit and then insufferable takes on politics with the Transformers, it's going to be one side of the bad guys, one side of the good guys kind of thing. So I think that's going to be interesting. I don't know what they're going to be doing with Transformers. I don't really know where the hell Void Rivals is going to tie in. The most recent issue had them show up on Cybertron briefly, and our old pal Shockwave's running around. So who the fuck knows where that's going to go. I'm hoping and pleading that we don't get another fucking series of nothing but everything went according to Shockwave's plan bullshit again. That got really fucking insufferable with IDW, where they kept pulling the, oh, I planned all this shit out 8 billion years ago in advance, and I was actually this guy in disguise the entire time. There's like 4 fucking Shockwaves running around at one point. It gets really fucking stupid. So I really, really hope we don't do that again. I seriously hope you guys don't do this. But again, this is the very beginning. There's not a whole lot of room really to speculate. But I think it's a very good foundation, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. So again, I would recommend, this is definitely a good start, and it does seem very promising from going on here. That's going to be all for me this time. This has been Jay. I'm going to be trying to keep a very solid focus on this universe. I'll probably do a quick recap of Void Rivals at some point as well, probably when that kind of hits issue 6 or so. I'm doing a little shorter, more scripted kind of thing for that instead. But from there, I'm going to be try to do a every issue as they come out. So if you enjoyed this, check out my other videos, and if you want to hear more about this, then we'll see you next month for the next issue. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching.